our intentionality. I think even in marriage, right? Like if you're not intentional in your marriage, the natural thing is to drift, be isolated, be independent, be alone. But like fighting for that community, I think is really important. And there's a lot of other deeper things that have to happen too. Like I think you have to find yourself, like, what kind of people are you gravitating towards, you know, because you can't really commit to everybody. So what kind of people, who are you? If you don't know who you are, that's kind of hard to even find people that you're gravitating towards. So who are you? Who do you gravitate towards? And like, is there that natural chemistry there where, and it's like naturally agreed upon, where you guys do want to commit to each other and support each other, and like it's that type of relationship that regardless of distance that you would still commit to like a phone call once a month or once every couple months and be willing to adjust that. And I do find that it's particularly difficult in the New Jersey context as well. I think it's key to also not spread yourself out too thin, right? Like ideally you can only commit to like 6-7 people at that deep kind of level, and then depending on how busy your life is, like you may not be able to do more than that. Everybody else is more just like acquaintance friendship. And I think that's the hard part, is sometimes like we don't know who to put into that inner circle, especially as Christians. We feel like we have to love everybody, and you can love everybody, but that doesn't mean everybody is like close to you, or like when you're going through a grieving process or a job loss or something difficult, like who are those people that you're going to call first who can speak into your life and encourage you and come over and watch a movie with you. I think that's important.
I agree, especially, you know, if you can only make one phone call, who would it be?
Who would it be?
For the record, Rich is not in prison a lot of times. Not a personal experience. But
okay, so this is like the final question before you then have questions for us. So, you know, we've talked about coming from an Asian culture. We come from, you know, Nigeria, so it's more of a collectivist, like societal framework, right? Like it's your people, right? You know, it's kind of, you don't just do for yourself, you're doing for your family, right? In that sense. But I found that what that does many times, right, is that we then tend to gravitate toward people like us. We kind of, you know, say, these people are like me, so I'll be here. But then that doesn't open up the door for more communal room, right? And I think my thing for you is that with both of you, I haven't seen that, which is why you're sitting here. I haven't seen that at all. And so my question for you is, how do you think we can make more communal room for people from like every tribe and tongue, right? And how has practicing this value impacted your dynamic? So you've heard us talking about small groups. Sharon is the small groups coordinator for our church, and she's fantastic, you know, at it, because like she said, community is the heart of everything that she's about. So my question to you is, how do you think we can make more room? And that's important right now because, you know, America is in a state of, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it. But I think as Christ followers, right, we've seen models, and you know that what you see out there, all that thing, is not what happens at the, you know, community, family level. And I think that that's sometimes a disconnect that people have. They think, oh, America is, you know, on fire. But, you know, if you step down to the street and the home level, there's still a lot of love, community, you know, sharing, generosity going on. And I personally believe that, you know, America is one of the most generous countries in the world. I don't think anything can change that, you know, thinking for me. So my question for you is, how do you think we can then make room, right, to have this like almost like heaven on earth ideology in terms of community?
I mean, I think sharing and generosity, those are great ones too. I think something I would add is curiosity. Being curious, I think, is a superpower that opens doors for relationships. Like if you're genuinely curious to ask questions about someone and get to know them, hear their story, they might be super different from you, from a different country or a different culture or whatever, but there's that human element that might actually connect you, and you might learn something new and also feel connected to that person. And I think oftentimes what separates people is that people tend to think they know exactly what's right and exactly how to live. And, you know, that's even speaking from my own experience. Like, I grew up in a certain context and it's like, this is the right way to live. But once I journeyed outside of the Asian bubble and started meeting other people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different ages, I've learned so much and built a sense of connection, you know, with people. And I think ultimately that forms community on a broad sense, but also that can also help you form your smaller community that we were talking about earlier, that like 5 to 7 or whatever number of people that are kind of like, you know, the ride or die kind of people that sometimes is used. And, you know, I think just being curious, but I think the other thing is looking at your life and looking at your priorities. I think sometimes we spend a lot of time doing things, and sometimes when you do too much, you cut out the time for meaningful, deep relationships that don't have an agenda. And I think when we have agendas all the time, and this is from like type A planner girl who loves agendas, right? So I get it. It's a struggle if you like agendas. But relationships that are life-giving and meaningful actually fuel your heart, you know, and if you live a life that's always agenda-packed, agenda-full, you're missing out on like a huge part of life.
I love it. I love it. I feel like we could just end this now. We're going to hear from Rich.
No, I mean, I think Sharon said it beautifully. I think we as humans, you know, we are natural storytellers. I know it's been said that the literacy started from individuals sharing stories with each other, and from that building out what we know to be modern day communication. And I think we've lost that a little bit in the present times. We've grown, and culture has told us that we have to build our own story, that we've lost the ability to listen and hear from other people's stories. So I think, you know, if there's more room that we can make to hear from other people's stories, other people's backgrounds, I think that'll give way to more community.
Yeah, the we is so much more powerful than the me. And we do live in like a me-driven society, right? Like it's, people even ask, like, what do you want to do with your life? And all the time it's focused on the individual. And I think we can start to change that narrative, right? Like even for the next generation coming up, apparently they're like one of the loneliest generations. They struggle a lot with social anxiety. And I think there's a reason for it, because we've created a culture where it's all about the individual, but I don't think we were created to be that way. And so when we're operating like outside of what we were designed to be like, that causes a lot of strife and anxiety.
I mean, I think that was, for us, was one of the reasons for this, right? In the sense that people call me all the time, which is ironic, because you're like, if you were to look at just the, you know, the views or whatever, you wouldn't know the impact you're making. But I get calls, I get text messages saying, you know, that issue you guys discussed, like, can you believe, I cannot even believe that I wasn't the only one going through that. And I said, yeah, I feel like for me, that was it, right? Because sometimes the enemy wants to make you feel like you're the only one going through a particular situation. And I said, remember, there's a part of scripture that says there's no temptation, right? Common to man that has not befallen other. But I think for marriage too, it's that same thing. Like, I mean, hearing you talk about, you know, people calling, you know, we're talking about King of the Castle, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, so it's like, okay. So this is not just something with us, right? So the funny things, the painful things, the conflict, it's common. I think it's what I'm trying to say. I mean, look at you from just completely different cultural backgrounds, and we're having the same conversation about the same experiences. And I think to me, that's the beauty of it, right? To say that there's nothing that we cannot like walk through together.
Yes,
right?
yes. And I think it's, you know, besides helping you grow and learn, it's healing.
Yeah.
It's super healing for the soul. And we've all been through this global pandemic, this global experience where so many things that maybe we haven't worked through are now coming to the surface. But I think conversations like this, podcasts, like people have a ton of podcasts now. It's so important because, when you know that you're not alone, you don't isolate yourself and you don't think like, oh, it's me, and kind of dig yourself into this hole and then kind of extricate yourself from, you know, community and become a shell of a person. But when you know you're not alone, you know that this, whatever you're facing, is not insurmountable, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there's people in it with you who have journeyed before you or are currently going through the journey right now. And I would say, it's very common from what I've heard, especially, like being a small groups coordinator, meeting so many different people. It's very common for people who have kids living in New Jersey to feel like they're alone and that they don't have community. And to be honest with you, like, I'm still scratching my head sometimes to be like, why is that? Like, I don't know that my method is like star and true. I think there's other ways to do things, but I'm always wondering, like, what is it? Of course, there's the natural things of, kids' schedules and the busyness and all of that. But I'm like, there's gotta be a world where, if we had kids, you had kids, like, we can get together, the kids can hang out together, they can have community and grow together and not just be, playing video games by themselves. At least they play video games together, like, even if it's still video games, they do it together. Yeah. But there's got to be a world where that exists.
I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think we've seen a small part of that from your past life, like growing up a little bit. I don't know if you want to like speak into that a little bit. I don't know if it's replicable or can bring that into other people's lives. You guys had like family meetings back in your own church, and the kids would get together sometimes and like be in the basement doing whatever. And
wow, that's bringing me back definitely more than a couple of years. When I think about growing up in the church, especially in the home church, we would have some meetings. We called them family meetings, and you would basically host a large group at your home, and sometimes the kids would be there and sometimes the kids wouldn't be there. I think when we were younger, it was probably better for the kids not to be there, but if we were there, then we would be in someone's room or we would be in the basement, and if the parents were lucky, we'd be doing homework. If they weren't lucky, we would be wrecking something down in the basement. But we went from one home to another, so everyone got a turn at that. As we got older, and especially as we were able to travel a little bit more, and when we were teenagers, the kids, we would just, if the family meeting started, we would either go out, maybe go watch a movie, or we would go to the diner somewhere. But for that group of friends, we got so close that even if there wasn't any meetings, we would still meet up. So I remember a period of my time when I was in high school where Friday night we would go to church for Bible study. Then we would go out afterwards for just to talk and hang out. Saturdays we would basically spend the whole day playing tennis. We'd spend 3 to 5 hours playing tennis, and then we'd have dinner at someone's house. And then we would play video games after that. And then Sunday we'd be at church, and then after church we would go out to eat, and then we would play like frisbee or something. So even if we didn't have those meetings, we would spend so much time with each other that that's how we built community.
But is that replicable now? I think that's kind of the world that Sharon is talking about that I think about too. Like for the children, like now, I'm just thinking how.
I don't know. Like, I don't know that I have an answer for you. Like, I wish I had the answer. So call me in 10 years and I'll let you know how it's going. Okay. But, like, my vision, I guess, like, me and my close friends, we kind of joke about it right now that, like, I'm their kids' aunties and same here and everything. Like, we have a fur baby, so when we go away, like, sometimes he's with my mom, but we've also been talking about having Archie stay with one of our close friends, And I think we would hope that translates if we have kids in the future, right? Like, that's the level of commitment I think that I'm looking for in my close friends. And they agree to it too, where like, if someone has a kid and they're going away, we would take care of their kid. And if, vice versa, same thing. And so, I mean, I think it could be manageable, but I don't know, right? Like life changes. You might move and you might not have that proximity. You might have to start over again. But I think if you're just having conversations with people and listening and trying to see like what kind of people they are, like are they the type of people that prioritize community and that kind of lifestyle, and do you trust them and do you admire and respect them? I think there could be something there. I think it's holding these things loosely too, to be like, those are the desired dreams and goals, but you never really know. Like,
I'm gonna touch up on trust, right? So we're talking about all the beautiful sides of community, but community too is you can get hurt.
And that's why people don't want it. That's why people don't want it. Because when it's great, it's great.
Yeah.
And when it hurts, it hurts.
Yeah, yeah. So speak to that. Like, how do you, for someone who has tried and was hurt, right?
Yeah.
Even on an individual level, and sometimes it gets to a family level, right, where it's kind of your family against another person's family based on something a child did or a mother did or something. So how would you, what would be your, I guess, advice or thoughts of wisdom for people to navigate that?
Yeah, I think it does require a lot of wisdom and discernment because it's so specific to the person, specific to the situation and the type of person you're interacting with. I would say, like, for myself, I've had experiences when we're, like, in a committed, like, friendship, which sometimes my friends joke to be like, this is a marriage, you know, like, the amount of commitment we have and time we spend. When there's hurt feelings, I think it's important that you work on your own emotional health and journey, make sure you're healthy, and they are committed to doing the same thing. Because if both of you or one of you is emotionally unhealthy, meaning like you're very combative, you're attacking, you won't hear the other person out, you think it's definitely the other person that's wrong, and you can't even own like one sliver piece of the pie, that's a toxic person who hasn't learned like themselves yet, and they need to learn themselves before they get into community. I think that's actually core too. Learning your own emotional journey and health before you get into, you know, these types of relationships, or else it's a bomb that goes off. So like I have a specific friendship where, you know, there was like some sort of hurt or whatever, but we were very close to each other, and we're both committed to working on our own emotional health. And so we were able to be vulnerable and open up and be like, hey, like, I really love you and you're like a sister to me. But when this happened, I felt really, really hurt. And I know you didn't mean it that way, but blah, blah, blah. And you do lay your heart on the line. It is risk. It's a vulnerability because the other person can smash you down. And they responded with like kindness and love and graciousness. And I think that really deepens the relationship, because then you can also come back to and, you know, give grace or apologize and forgive and move right past it. And me and this particular friend have done this like a handful, not a lot that you're like, why are we always having this? Right? Because that's a flag too. If you're always having these conversations, that's exhausting, and it might just actually better that you two go your separate ways, right? But if it's like once in a while because of whatever, like that's fine. That happens in marriage, right? And so I think forgiving and moving past and being gracious and working on your own emotional health is important. Then there's the other side of like someone maybe that you are just getting close to, you have a lot in common, you enjoy them, but maybe there is a part of you, I think you have to do some own self-discovery to see like, why does something feel off? Is it because of something I'm going through, or is it actually this relationship? Because I had a friendship like that too, where you know, she felt a lot closer to me than I felt close to her, but I wasn't really sure why. And then over time, the friendship kind of like didn't, you know, go well. And looking back, it's like, oh, we were both actually chasing different things, which is why I felt like it still wasn't this similar feeling to what I felt before with other close friendships. And I think in those circumstances, like, you have to be willing to let it go. And there was like some hurt there too, because she kind of like accused or like said things that I felt like was accusatory. But now, like, if I see her, like, it's fine, we forgive each other, like there's no issue, but you know, just acknowledging that we're not going to be like that kind of type close friendship, but we're still friendly with each other. And I also think it's easy once it's a little easier once you try it more times, right? Like when you get hurt, it's really easy to recoil and be like, I never want to have friends, I'm never trying again. But once you get a taste of what like those great, deep, intimate friendships feel like, you kind of get a better sense of like what you want and what you're looking for. It's hard to like prescribe for each person. And I do think it's important to like do research and figure out what it means to have good boundaries and what it means to have toxic relationships. Whether or not you're a codependent person, like digging into some of these like more psychological principles, because if you know a little bit about it, you can know how you're contributing to it, and then how maybe someone else is contributing to it, and whether or not the relationship is healthy or not for you.
And I think as you were alluding to before, there's only a certain amount of space that you have in your life to have these intentional relationships. So if you find yourself taking a look at your relationships and seeing friendships that either may have been strong in the past and they are not as strong anymore, or there's just something toxic about the relationship, or even, in the case that I experienced where our values started to differ, it may be time to prune the relationship. And I think it's understandable, as we continue to grow, as we continue to evolve as people, our values will change and our values will differ from others in our life, and that's just part of life.
I think it's important to get feedback too, right? Because for that particular friendship he was talking about, they were friends in school, so it was a proximity thing. So, and I saw that when we were together and I met that friend, I was like, I don't know that you guys are actually close. I think it's actually because of proximity and you guys are doing something together. But as time goes on, like, I don't know that this relationship will last. But it was hard for you to let go because of the proximity and the amount of time, and you guys went through a specific schooling together, right? And that it's like a fraternity sometimes, it bonds you, right? And that can be difficult, but I think it's important to evaluate with other people who know you and who are close to you, to be like, is this friendship good for you, right? Like, is this more of a proximity friendship, or are you just going through a rough patch, like with a friend, right? So having that feedback, I think, is...
I like something Rich said about pruning, right? Because when I think about pruning, I don't think about cutting off just for the sake of it, right? A pruning is for like directional growth.
Yes. For both of you.
For both, for both parties. And so I like that word pruning, to say, it's not like I'm cutting you off, because cutting you off sounds so toxic. But you just realize, okay, perhaps this is best for each person to go so they can grow, right? In whatever directions that they are seeking to grow.
For sure. And I think it's important that, like, if you do find a toxic person, to not be like, you're a toxic person, because that can go really poorly too, because then you're probably the toxic person as well if you're pointing that out like that.
If you're the person pointing, always pointing out toxic people, maybe you should point like to yourself and say, what's going on here.
Yeah, because like, that's like the term that everybody uses, toxic relationships, but a part of me doesn't like that either.
Me too.
Because I feel like everybody has a little bit of toxicity in ourselves, like I do too, and it's about growth. And I think we're all growing, and I think it's just finding the people that are willing to put up with your toxicity and grow with you, and that you're willing to grow too, because no one's perfect. And so, and so I don't think you should be like, oh, that person is this, so they're toxic, I'm going to cut them off, or like, bye, like, you might want to examine, like, are you afraid, to be vulnerable and engage in meaningful relationships, because, if you always put that wall, it's easier to point those fingers outward.
Thank you so much. So now this is the time where we're asking
what questions you have for us.
So I guess the first question I asked is what are the next topics? We've taken community, we've taken values, but what are the next few topics on the agenda?
So it depends on who's coming on. So when people peak, right, we kind of will then decide. You look at, say, okay, what are the questions we want to draw from them based on the age and stage of marriage, right? Because I feel like you're giving so much value for people who are in this stage. And even older couples can look back and say, oh, wow, I remember. I remember when it was this stage and when we had this. So I feel like even those experiences of reminiscing and nostalgia, right, can be good for the soul. So, it really depends on, who's coming up. But when you were talking about toxicity, I just said just the way people say narcissist, right? So we're going to be having somebody who is psychiatry is their specialty, addiction medicine, and also they'll help maybe delve more into that in a little bit as to how it even impacts parenting and communication, in relationships. But we really don't know what the exact topics are. It depends on who's coming.
It's exciting in a way, but it helps the people speak to their strengths and their experiences. Because I think what you've experienced, you're the expert on what you've experienced. So leaving that window open, almost like a box of chocolate. But essentially, when we send that form out, you say what you are comfortable with or what you want to speak to, and it always so far is made for knock on wood for interesting conversation. I do know one gray area where we haven't really talked about
sex.
Yes.
My favorite topic. I love love this topic also because as Christians we don't talk about it, and it's so taboo and everything. Yes.
Funny thing is, we haven't had anybody who
picked it.
Was it on the thing? I don't remember.
Did you?
It was. We had it as coupling though.
No. I think we had it as
sex. Sex is one of the top.
Maybe I
have to go back and look.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm totally comfortable with this topic, and I would love to learn from other people too. Because it's in the Christian world, like no one really talks about it, and no one talks about the nitty gritty of it. Like,
although we did have a friend who
had a sex workshop.
Yeah, they have
in the church.
At the church.
In the church.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, he can talk to about it. He's great. Him and his wife are actually one of the people who lived in the house with another couple and did communal together in Boston. They're great, fantastic.
So, is he a sex therapist or just
no
personal experience?
And she actually works for the church that we went.
Gotcha.
And he's very open.
Very open.
Yeah,
not shy at all.
You know who I'm talking about.
If you're listening to this. Okay, so guess what? Then we'll come back for that. I feel like there should be a season dedicated to that from early, middle, and late. I think so.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting to get her perspective because she's more shy, and so what she struggles with is like communicating during sex and stuff like that. I feel like what we struggle with is like sex was not talked about in the household. So when it comes to communicating about sex, we're just like, is this okay? I'm not really sure.
So, but then where do you get answers from? We're going to do this.
Stay tuned.